Yes, thanks very much, Evan. I think what the public will need to understand is what's actually happened here. The Police National Database was set up as a result of the Soham inquiry. So I'm incredibly proud of my colleagues who've worked tirelessly to create what is a very impressive database. Now the problem has come because we've actually embraced new technology. We've embraced photo recognition. Now that wasn't covered by the Protection of Freedoms Act a few years ago that covered DNA and fingerprints. So what we've done is we've taken the Data Protection Act as our Bible on this, which means chief constables as data owners can only keep what's reasonable and can only keep it for as long as is reasonable. And you're absolutely right, there have been 2 High Court cases that have affected the Metropolitan Police, which in effect says you can't keep photographs of unconvicted people as long as those that are convicted, which is absolutely right, and that's why I'm introducing that concept into the PND.
Sorry, so but for a year or so you have been introducing the unconvicted into the database, as I understand it, and using facial recognition software, knowing that a court has asked you not to do that.
Well, no, I'm unashamed about keeping unconvicted photographs in this because we need them for different purposes than DNA and fingerprints, and they're not covered by the same legislation. I think it's entirely true that the Metropolitan Police are working on making sure that they're compliant with those High Court actions, but of course the Metropolitan Police have chosen not to upload their images into the database until they are so compliant. And this is all about making people safe.
No, but let me be clear that the Met weren't doing it because the court order was against them, you're saying, but everybody else said, well, we haven't got a court order against us, so we can do it. Is that what the position was?
No, the position is we are working towards understanding exactly what our regime should be, right, because an Act of Parliament is silent on this. That's why we've chosen to use the Data Protection Act, because it governs us.
Why didn't you tell the Biometric Commissioner, this chap who we heard in our piece there, he asked, I think, he asked police forces to tell him if they were using facial recognition software on the pictures. And no one thought to mention it to him. He was taken by surprise.
Well, I've spoken to the Commissioner. Now, the Biometrics Commissioner covers DNA and fingerprints. Now, voluntarily, I spoke to the Commissioner and told him that we developed this software, and I was very proud of it. I was also very proud of the number of arrests that we've made as a result of it. Now, he expressed surprise that he felt that there should be more checks and balances around that. I understand, he's absolutely right, there should be checks and balances. It's just we probably don't see eye to eye on this, but the Biometrics Commissioner does not govern the retention of photographs.
OK. Let me bring 2 other guests who've been listening to that, the former Home Office Minister and Liberal Democrat MP Norman Baker, and Vera Baird, QC, the Labour Police and Crime Commissioner for Northumbria, who was also the Solicitor General from 2007 to 2010. Good evening to you both. Norman Baker, just on the sort of the fact that this has been going on, you were in the Home Office until relatively recently. Did you know it was going on?
No, and I don't think many people knew it was going on by the sounds of it. And I think there are 3 reasons why the police ought to have stopped and asked themselves what they were doing and whether it was with public support. First of all, we've got the court case you referred to, since when a whole lot more images have been uploaded in defiance of the court. Secondly, the Chief Constable Mike Barton refers to Data Protection Act. The Data Protection guidelines from the Information Commissioner suggest on CCTV, for example, that images should be kept only as long as a crime is being investigated and then destroyed. That's completely different to what's happening here, which is the indefinite and endless accumulation of photographs from wherever it can come. And thirdly, in terms of the mood of Parliament and the coalition government, we've seen, for example, the coalition government saying very clearly we shouldn't be keeping information which is not necessary. ID card scheme was scrapped. DNA has been limited in terms of whose DNA is kept. Fingerprinting of children at school has been ended. This is going in the opposite direction.
I mean, Mike Barton, you can see why the public might think you were pulling a fast one here, just not mentioning something that was obviously going to be of interest and importance to the Home Office, to the politicians who published acts regulating fingerprints and DNA. It was, of course, you had to tell people, and you just didn't mention it.
Well, I can't keep everybody up to date with everything I do on a daily basis, but I'm charged with making the public safe. That's what my oath is about, and that's why we've developed this software, because it's available and we've kept up to speed with it. Now, everybody is very keen that the police enter the cyber world. I hear much criticism of policing that we're not up to speed, and it does come as a surprise to me that we're now being admonished for being ahead of the game. Now, I'm very clear this is governed by legislation. It's governed by the Data Protection Act, it's governed by the Human Rights Act, and we are cognizant of those. Now, if Parliament chooses to, by Act of Parliament, to regulate our use of photographs over and above that which we already have, then I'm more than happy
So now
to
we've told everybody, the politicians can sit down and decide whether they want to. Vera Baird, I'm really interested in your view of whether this is making the public safer.
Well, I can see why Mike wants to use it. There's no doubt of that. I don't know if it's making the public safer. I think the public sometimes have a problem about confidence in the police, and that they won't like this whole notion that, you know, somebody who's been arrested but absolutely left without a stain on their character is nonetheless being used in this way. I mean, he has a point that there isn't direct regulation of it. There's a data commissioner, there's information commissioner, there's the surveillance camera commissioner, and there's the biometrics commissioner, and none of them cover this, but they know that as well. And of course, there was some management guidance which the Met were using for the way they deal with these photographs, and it was that which was found unlawful by the High Court. So the only framework there was has been pushed out, and really at that point you would think it's incumbent on the police to say, look, we need some guidance here, we need some regulation.
Instead,
we shouldn't just drive through.
Got on using it. But look, is it a good thing that they have a database of 18 million people and they can run a program through it and take a CCTV picture of a crime and then find the criminal?
Well, it depends what you mean by a good thing. If my photograph's on it and it's being run through and mistakenly, because this facial recognition technology, of which Mike is so proud, is far from perfect. You know, if I then get into a difficulty because wrongly my photo's been kept, wrongly I've been recognised as a criminal, then no, I don't think it will be a good thing. And that's the risk that's being taken. I think what really worries me an enormous amount is the sheer quantity of it. Apparently, the Biometrics Commissioner says that 12 million photographs have been added in 8 months. Now, that is absolutely at random and can have no resemblance to doing any controlled, managed or regulated way at all. They're just chucking on every photo they can find.
Norman Baker, they are often accused of not joining the dots. You've seen cases where there's been someone who's been involved in several incidents and the police haven't joined the dots. And this helps them join the dots, doesn't it?
There's a question of proportionality as to what the police should hold in way of information. And that applies as a principle, whether it's fingerprints, DNA or pictures, and the police really ought to know that. We haven't discussed this in public. This ought to be subject to public consultation and indeed sanction from ministers and Parliament. It's not been. So I think the question that I'd like to ask Mike Barton, who authorised the collection of this information? Who has access to it? Under what conditions do people have access? How long are the photographs kept, and what safeguards exist? We don't know the answer to any of those questions.
And I don't think we're going to have time to do all of those now, Mike. But look, can I just ask you one last one? 18 million faces. 18 million, that's 40% of the UK adult population. How can you have so many faces? These are taken from custody shots.
That's right, these are all custody mugshots. But of course, if somebody's offended in 4, 5, 6, 7 different forces, I'll have 4, 5, 6, 7 different images of that person. Recently, we had a job in Durham that we identified somebody, photographs in Scotland and Devon and Cornwall, an offender from Sussex, and we arrested him. There are now 3 images of that particular person. And this is governed by the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. We take these photographs under law.
No.
Vera Baird is saying no. Look, is there a difference
There's
between
a framework there, but it's not being followed.
Is there a difference between a fingerprint, which is regulated, and a facial picture?
If
Mike?
you're asking me, then a face is absolutely different. And everybody's talking about facial recognition. The most powerful computer that can recognise faces are our witnesses in crimes and our victims. And if victims see somebody and they can identify them again, this is a valuable tool for us to arrest those people who are harming communities.
We are trying to get lots of facts here. How many of the 18 million are convicted criminals?
I don't know exactly.
Roughly.
That's what I'm working through. So your panellists are absolutely right. There has got to be regulation here, and we're part of a consultation now with the Home Office to see whether these regulations ought to be strengthened. My understanding is that's going to report to ministers in May of this year.
It's the unconvicted which worries both of you, is that
Yes,
right?
absolutely. I mean, there is a balance to be struck, and we've taken the position in government that people who are innocent should not have their fingerprints and DNA maintained by the police. People who are a threat to society and being convicted, those records are maintained. The same principle should apply here with photographs. And in terms of the photographs and fingers being different, they're not. They are both unique measures of identifying the individual.
Last
Actually,
word, Vera.
the privacy invasion from a photograph is far bigger. If I
Indeed, it
gave
is.
you my DNA and my fingerprints, you wouldn't say that's Vera Baird, but I gave you a photograph, you recognise it straight away. It's a massive invasion of privacy. It's Parliament's fault too for not seeing it. We need to regulate it. There's no doubt of that. And I think Mike agrees.